Welcome to or back to my channel. I'm going to be sharing 5 things to do in Grand Tetons. Grand Tetons is hands down one of the most breathtaking national parks I've ever been to. I would say that it's in my top 5 favorites, and I just learned so many amazing hikes and cliff jumps and rock climbing adventures while I was there that I wanted to share with all of you guys. It's about $35 for a week-long pass, so you can continue to go in and out of the park for 7 days. That's pretty on par with other national parks. I think Joshua Tree is like $30. I feel like Yosemite is similar. What I do is I have this annual national park pass, so I can go to all the national parks as many times as I want in a year, and this pass is $80. So for me, it's very worth it because I go to a lot of national parks, and if you go to even just 3, it really pays itself off. And without further ado, let's just jump right into it. The first thing that I recommend doing in the Grand Tetons is very beginner friendly and is such a great entry point into kind of what to do there. I did this hike to Taggart Lake on my first day there, and it really displays all the terrain very well. At the end of the hike, there's a beautiful lake with crystal clear water. You could even swim in it if you wanted to, and it only has 300 feet of elevation gain, so it's very beginner friendly if you're going with your family or anything like that, but it doesn't disappoint with the view at the end. So it also has that really powerful magical moment where you really feel what the Grand Tetons is like and what it means to be in this mountain range, because it is a very stunning lake and view. Honestly, one of my favorites in the Grand Tetons. The hike to Taggart Lake is also not very crowded. When we went there and we got to the lake, there were only a handful of other people, and there were even moments when we were there alone. So this is a great hike if you're looking for something a little more remote as well. Number 2 on the list is Phelps Lake. This can be longer or shorter depending on how you hike it. The trail is rated as easy, and it's a 2-mile round trip hike to the overlook with 395 feet of elevation gain. But if you wanted to go further, you could hike up to 7 miles depending on how you do it. And if you want to continue forward from that overlook, you can hike about 1.4 miles further and get to this beautiful sandy beachy area. This area was really not crowded at all. There were moments where Taylor, my friend, and I were alone on this beach for a really long time, and actually only 2 other people came. If you do go on this hike, be sure to bring your bear spray and be prepared to see wildlife. So if you do want to see wildlife, this is a great hike to go on. We saw a bear when we went, and we also later saw a moose, and we saw some sort of like beaver type animal. And then if you continue even further into the hike, you can reach a cliff jump. This is about 25 feet high. It's very scary. The water is extremely cold. It's shocking when you jump into that water and you realize how cold it is, but the view is so beautiful as you're jumping, and it's just like the most crystal clear water. You have that mountain range view all around you. You have a view of the beach that you were just at. This is one of my favorite hikes, I think, for the cliff jump in particular. Third thing on the list is rock climbing. I feel like a visit to the Grand Tetons would not be complete without some rock climbing or alpinism. But you don't have to have experience to do this. There are plenty of guide trips that you can book. One of them that I looked up is called the Exum Guide Service. I personally haven't done this service, but it is the oldest guide service in North America, and they have guided people from ages of 8 to 80. Alpinism and climbing is such a big part of the culture in the Grand Tetons, and I really think that if you have the physical ability to do this, you should definitely give it a shot. Me and my friend, we have climbed before, and we have our own gear, so we were able to go out with friends. If you are an experienced climber, you can get the app Mountain Project. I'm sure you guys probably already know that if you're climbers, but if you're not, again, definitely look into guides. You can also rent gear if you're flying and you don't want to bring your gear. There's a place in Jackson Hole called it's called Teton Mountaineering, so you can go there, you can rent shoes, and you can get to climbing. The next hike is a little more advanced. This hike is called Delta Lake, and it's 9+ miles depending on how you do it. It's very strenuous, very difficult, and it requires some level of navigation. The trail can usually only be accessed from June to October because of snowfall and winter weather, but it is so worth it to do this hike if you are going within that time frame, because the hike finishes at this dreamy lake with alpine waters. You could even jump in those waters if you did. We brought swimsuits to do it, and we actually didn't end up doing it because at the top it was already so cold that it just felt like way too painful to get into the water. We brought our swimsuits and we're thinking about jumping in.
And we made these guys jump in.
We made them. They were like, we're thinking of jumping in. We're like, we're gonna do it. And then they did it. Now we still have it.
And I don't know if I want to.
Yeah.
I'm just so cold already without the water.
My fingers are already like numb. If you are experienced with cold water exposure and that's something you're into, definitely bring your swimsuit because we saw multiple people jump in at the top. I don't know how they did it. Big props to them. But that was a very cool experience, even to just be up there and see that view. But because this hike is a little more difficult, the last few miles are a bit of a scramble and there's not a very clearly marked trail. There's like rock fall and tree stumps in the way and stuff like that. I highly recommend getting the app All Trails just to help you with your navigation. But also, this was one of the most crowded hikes I went on in the Grand Tetons. Some people say it's a hidden gem. That was not my experience. There were tons of people there, so it was also really easy to just ask people around us, fellow hikers, what the way is, and they kind of guided us in that direction as well. So yeah, it is a little more crowded of a hike. For me, it was very worth it though, just to see that stunning view at the top, and there were views all the way around, all the way through the switchbacks. I mean, it is a stunning hike. This hike has 2,300 feet of elevation gain, so it is definitely rated much more difficult than the easier ones like Taggart Lake. Oh, the other thing about Delta Lake is that that is another hike that people frequently encounter bears on, so again, just be very careful. I made a whole video about what to do when you're encountering bears and about my personal bear encounter in the Grand Tetons. It's really not that rare when you're in this mountain range. They are everywhere, it feels like, wildlife in general, but specifically with the bears, you know, get yourself bear spray, make sure you're prepared. Coming in at number 5, this is another kind of easier thing to do in the Grand Tetons if Delta Lake is a little out of your range, and it is watching the wildlife. Grand Tetons is one of the best places to see wildlife because it lies in the heart of the largest temperate ecosystems in the world. There are bears, moose, bison, sandhill cranes, beavers, elk, and so many more animals that you can see in this area. Some of the best places you can go to spot wildlife are the Antelope Flats, Willow Flats, Oxbow Bend, and Moose Wilson Road. And that wraps it up for the 5 things to do in Grand Tetons. This, again, like I said, was one of my favorite national parks I've ever been to. Definitely on my top 5 list of national parks. So I am so excited for you because I'm assuming that if you're watching this video, you're going to the Grand Tetons soon or are considering it, and it will not disappoint. But if you are going to be going to the Grand Tetons, I highly recommend adding Yellowstone to your list. That's just a little further up north, and it has beautiful hot springs and geysers, and it's just a very kind of magical place. There are some more remote hikes up north, like to waterfalls and stuff like that within Yellowstone, because a lot of the hot springs are a bit more busy and crowded, but it's definitely worth going to, especially if you're already going through Grand Tetons, so you could kind of like put those trips together. I think a lot of people do that, and that's what I personally did. So that wraps it up for the 5 things to do in Grand Tetons video. If you enjoyed this video, please give it a thumbs up because it really supports my channel, and subscribe because I'm posting videos every 3 days now, so that's Wednesdays and Sundays around noon on both of those days, but sometimes it changes. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.